Hi, I'm personal trainer YUJI.
Today, I want to talk about the traps that intermediate level individuals can easily fall into during weight training. These are not beginners. They have likely been training for about 1 to 3 years. Even if they have been training a bit longer, they are still considered intermediate level. At this general level, while they are putting in a lot of effort into their training, there are still some issues that need to be addressed. Yes, while doing it, there are quite a few instances where one falls into traps. This is particularly true for those at the intermediate level, as these habits become ingrained, and they may think that what they are doing is normal. I will point out a few key points here, so I would like you to pay attention. The first common issue is that they are often lifting extremely heavy weights, but only focusing on the upper body. In other words, I often refer to myself as being focused on the weight and repetitions, and this was evident today as well. I was training at a gym that was a bit different from my usual one, and I noticed a man using a Smith machine for squats. It was one of those large cages where the barbell runs along rails. He seemed to be relatively slim, and I would guess he is around 30 years old. I was doing squats, and when I looked at the squat pad, it seemed to have about 100 kilograms on it at first glance. That's quite a bit of weight. I was wondering if they were really lifting that much, and then I noticed that they were only going down about a quarter of the way from the top. They were just doing little movements, barely going down at all. They seemed to be a bit conscious of the camera, so they weren't really going low, but honestly, they were only going down a quarter of the way with the squat. It's not a squat where you stick your butt out. Rather, it's a squat where the knees come forward from the start. While glancing down like a cat, it can be quite dangerous to do squats while looking down. I think I was probably doing 100 kilograms for a few sets. So it doesn't feel like today is the first time I've seen this. Of course, you don't just suddenly lift 100 kilograms, right? I wonder if he's doing it like that too. But it feels like such a waste, doesn't it? I can tell that this person is not a beginner, but it still seems a bit wasteful. While I was thinking this, I noticed that there was a free squat rack over here. Now that I look at it, it's a Smith machine with a rail, but it's free. There was someone who came to use the squat rack with a regular barbell. Well, at this point, it was clear that this person was obviously from a sports background. This text describes a relatively young person around the age of a university student or just graduated who appears to have a well-built physique, looking quite muscular. He has a certain amount of muscle and is actively involved in sports like soccer, which requires running. The text mentions that this man, who is still in his early 20s, was performing squats with a weight of 80 kilograms compared to the earlier mention of 100 kilograms. While doing the squat with 80 kilograms, he lowered his thighs to a horizontal position, maintaining a controlled movement without rushing, ensuring that his thighs were parallel to the ground. I was doing squats in a way that felt right, like, this is it, this is what this person is doing. My body feels like I can honestly do more, but I'm using a weight that isn't too heavy. I'm being careful with my form, lowering myself to a horizontal position. Right now I'm using 100 kilograms on the Smith machine and 80 kilograms on the free squat rack. To be honest, the 8 kilograms on the free squat rack feels a bit heavy and challenging at times, but of course, there's also a bit of fear involved. However, I'm managing to lower myself deeply with the 80 kilograms on the free squat rack. That's why he has a great physique. This is where the differences start to show, resulting in varying outcomes. So, let's try to move away from the focus on weight and repetitions. Even if the weight is around 80% or half of what it could be, it's better to perform the exercises deeply and slowly. Doing this will actually lead to a better physique, so it's important to be mindful of this aspect. The second point is about the immediate focus principle. This is the first aspect of the immediate focus principle. The concept of being focused on the immediate task refers to the act of moving what is right in front of you. For example, when using gym machines like a rowing machine, the focus is on simply moving the handle back and forth. This applies to rowing exercises as well, whether pulling from above or not. The question arises whether the only goal in mind is just to pull this handle. Before starting, one might think of it as just a machine, but ultimately it seems to boil down to this. The main focus becomes pulling with just the arms, resulting in the back remaining in this position so the back isn't contracting at all. This is quite common. Since it's back training, the back should be contracting and extending, but often it turns into just moving the object in front of you. This applies to everything, really. It applies to all movements. For example, if the dumbbell is moving, some might think it's okay for the hips to move as well, but that doesn't count as effective weight training for the biceps. In weight training, the act of moving the weights in front of you is important. especially in sports. If the goal is simply to move objects, that's fine. However, for those who are generally engaged in weight training to improve their physique, the focus should be on the contraction and extension of the muscles. Properly executing the process of shortening and lengthening the muscles is the main priority, and the weights attached to the ends are just a byproduct of that action. Therefore, the main focus should be on the contraction and extension of the target muscles, and if you have nothing in your hands, you can still achieve that. Even when you are holding something, it's just a matter of having a slight thought about closing it. You need to maintain that awareness, so the contraction and extension of the target muscles should be the priority. I want you to avoid losing sight of what you should be doing by only focusing on what is right in front of you. The third point is about being overly focused on the immediate, which is the second point. Yes, this is the second point. The second point is a common issue where individuals tend to focus only on the visible muscles in front of them. When looking in the mirror, they see their pectorals, biceps, and abs, and they work hard on these areas. However, they often neglect their back muscles, which are not only less frequently trained, but also less felt during workouts. For instance, with rowing exercises, one might think they are working their back, but in reality, those muscles may not be engaged at all. The reason why some people only focus on certain areas is that they are not paying attention to their backs. They tend to neglect what they can't see, which is simply that. Therefore, it's important to be able to see it. You just need to look at yourself. It's really that simple. If you can see that you are properly working on certain areas, then you must also ensure that you are working on your back just as diligently. Essentially, you should be doing the same amount of work for both the front and back. Since you can't see it, you might not be doing it, so please take a look. I encourage you to take a photo of your back. It could even be a video of you doing weight training. If you find it difficult to record yourself, you can set up a camera in your room and take a photo or video of yourself from behind using a timer. It might be better to pose for the shot rather than just capturing yourself in action. Please try doing that once. By doing so, you'll first understand what your back looks like. It's necessary to view it objectively. When you take a photo of your back, you might realize, oh, my back is quite rounded. This realization will help you understand that even though you are working on your back, you need to focus on tightening it. From there, you can determine what kind of weight training you need to do. If it is rounded, then you need to address that. By doing net lifts, you can alleviate this vertical marathon. This makes it clear that it's necessary to do deadlifts. Personally, I have also taken photos of my back. Since I work in a field where I engage with various social media, I took a photo of my back a while ago. When I looked at it, I realized that my back had a rather poor expression. You might wonder what expression means in this context, whether it's smiling or frowning. While there can be smiles or frowns, the expression is something that exists in the back as well. I didn't really understand the feeling of each contraction or the presence of muscle in that area. It's been over 10 years since I started thinking that way, but when I'm doing back training, I really feel the contraction. By exhaling properly, the contraction becomes quite strong. I make sure not to let it slip away. I focus on clearly exhaling and using the contracted muscles carefully. I have been doing this for over 10 years now, making sure to use the contracted areas and the surrounding muscles diligently. I believe that I have significantly improved my back, but it's not something that can be achieved in just 1 or 2 months. It requires effort over a year or so. However, when I took pictures of my back and my form, I realized that I should first look at them with one hand. This means making an effort to not just focus on what's in front of me, but also to look at the back. This is quite important. Additionally, another point is the lack of program review, which is quite common among intermediate-level individuals. As I observe various things, I notice this. It seems like I've been training quite a bit, doing bench presses with some reasonably heavy weights. However, I tend to do a lot of sets. I've been doing over 10 sets of bench presses, and once I finished about 10 sets, I moved on to completely different weight training for another muscle group. Oh, I finished my chest workout. After doing about 10 to 12 sets of bench presses, I thought, well, if that's the case, I don't really need to do 10 sets. It's suggested to keep the number of sets manageable, perhaps doing 2 or 3 different exercises, like incorporating some other movements casually. For instance, you could do bench presses and then perform a superset with them. It's good to mix things up, but when doing a superset of bench presses and arm curls, it's quite common. In your mind, you might think that bench presses engage the triceps and shoulders as secondary muscles, while arm curls target the biceps, so they complement each other well. Since I don't have a bench press available, I'll do some arm curls in between sets to save a bit of time. I think it's about using time efficiently, but in reality, I believe it's better not to do bench presses and arm curls as a superset. When you do arm curls, you engage your biceps, which is obvious. However, even when doing bench presses, you're not completely neglecting your biceps. You can probably tell this if you try doing it with just one arm holding a dumbbell. It gets tight, you know? It really does feel tight. It's tense here, and I'm maintaining a bit of tension, so when I'm doing this, it's already exhausting. Even when I do the bench press, this area is already tired, so it's hard to lift. I can't lift myself up. And with arm curls, it's not just the biceps. Actually, the front of the shoulder also gets quite involved. There's a lot of tension, and I'm using strength from the sides and the front as well. Even when my elbows move forward a bit, my shoulders are already engaged quite a lot during the arm curls. You can tell this if you're wearing a tank top. It's not just the biceps that are working, but the triceps are also quite engaged. That's why there's tension in that area. So I'm using that part during the arm curls. After that, when I move on to the bench press, I will also be using that area. Therefore, I think that combination is not very ideal. Additionally, I really need to reconsider whether this type of program is truly effective. Reviewing your approach should be more about regularly checking in rather than just a routine. For instance, platforms like YouTube or even other people's content can be helpful. It's important to look at the social media of individuals you admire, whether it's books or magazines, and see what kind of programs they are following. By gathering various pieces of information from those who have developed their bodies properly, you might realize that simply doing 10 sets of bench press isn't sufficient. This understanding will likely come to you as you explore this. When it comes to reviewing the program, it doesn't mean making drastic changes regularly. Rather, it's uncertain when changes should be made or if they should be made at all. Honestly, I'm not sure, but as I gather information from various people, I might think, maybe I should change this part. If I believe that a change could lead to better results, then I can make a small adjustment. So, the review of the program can be done as needed, and obtaining information for that purpose is crucial. Therefore, sticking to the same program for 5 years without progress is not ideal. I, too, have been gradually making changes along the way. It's important to have plenty of information and resources to facilitate these changes. While this isn't about the actual weight training itself, having good information is essential for making adjustments. For intermediate-level individuals, simply continuing with what has been done without questioning its effectiveness can lead to stagnation. To avoid falling into those traps, I think it would be good to review the things I just mentioned. So please do your best with that.
Please subscribe the channel and follow my Instagram and X. I hope to see you next time. ありがとうございます。